It's easy to believe that murderers are always caught, that the good guys always win. After all, the news tends to focus on these success stories, the mass murderers being captured, the one time offenders being locked up for life. It creates a sort of security in our society. However, unbeknownst to most of us, many murderers still walk free, perhaps without even being suspected as murderers. This is the story of a victim of one such criminal. This is the story of Millie Doe. Millie Doe has never been identified, officially making her a Jane Doe. However, the lead detective's daughter, a young girl at the time the case was initially opened, pointed out that this Jane Doe was a person and deserved her own unique name. The child christened her Millie, and it's what people have called her ever since. I will, of course, be calling her Millie Doe for the duration of this video, but I wanted to mention before we begin that we have no idea what this woman's name really is. Hopefully, someday, we will. We also don't technically know the woman's age, but as you will soon see, since there's a small possibility that she is a minor, I'm including her case on my channel. On June 20th, 1984, a corpse was discovered on the shore of the Spokane River in Spokane, Washington. The body was that of a woman, nude and decapitated, whose legs had been removed at the mid-calf and arms had been removed at the mid-forearm. This essentially removed the easiest ways to identify this poor woman and made it very clear that the police were dealing with a homicide. Thankfully, investigators were able to gather a lot of information about the woman from her body alone, which they estimated had been by the river for a little under a day before it was discovered. The woman was 16 to 30 years old, weighing around 130 pounds before her dismemberment and standing at about 5 feet 7 inches. She was Caucasian and likely had blonde or otherwise light hair. She had 2 scars, an oval horizontal scar on her left knee and a slanting scar on her left arm about 3.5 inches in length. 2 moles dotted the front of her neck, and she had multiple stretch marks on her abdomen and breasts, suggesting that she had given birth to at least one child before her death. It's a horrifying idea that somewhere out there, a child is left motherless by this gruesome crime. Millie was most likely from out of town because she didn't match the description of any local missing persons cases. This would make discovering her identity even more difficult, especially because of her missing limbs. Her hands and feet have never been discovered, although there have been several false leads with other severed appendages. Nothing came of those, though, meaning that whatever identifying information might have been gathered from her limbs is lost. Her skull, however, was discovered, although it was 4 years later in 1988. A woman walking her dog saw the skull in a vacant Spokane lot and called the police, who confirmed through DNA testing that it was Millie's skull. This helped flesh out what the woman may have looked like. She was missing all 4 wisdom teeth and had a noticeable gap between her 2 front teeth. Several sketches and digital models of what she might have looked like have been created, but nobody has come forward to claim Millie or explain what happened to her. This is where the internet comes in. Several websites have forums and threads dedicated to discovering Millie's identity, and it's honestly heartening to see so many strangers come together to help this anonymous woman so many decades after her death. I'm only going to discuss a few of my favorite theories here, but I got most of my information from the website Web Sleuths and missing persons pages on Reddit. I'll be leaving links to the threads regarding Millie in the description below. Please go support these amazing communities and read up further on Millie's case. The first two theories regard potential killers. Spokane is apparently no stranger to serial murderers. Robert Yates was a prolific serial killer throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, who was arrested in the early 2000s after the confirmed killing of many sex workers and drug addicts. He murdered at least 13 women, but police suspect many more. However, due to the illegal lives many of these women led, getting justice for all of them can prove to be quite difficult. Yates is a good suspect for Millie's case because he killed primarily in Spokane and had a gap in his usually clustered murders from 1975 to 1988, the time frame in which Millie was murdered. He also left some bodies along the Spokane River, similar to where Millie was discovered. However, Yates's identifying characteristic as a killer was to shoot his victims and dump their fully intact bodies. Sometimes he would put plastic bags over their heads, but none of his confirmed victims were ever dismembered or beheaded. The second possibility is Seattle and Tacoma serial killer Gary Ridgway. Police suspect he killed up to 71 women and girls, most of whom were sex workers or runaways, although he was convicted of far fewer murders. He dumped his victims' bodies naked, just as Millie was discovered, in sparsely populated areas such as forests or along rivers, and Millie's body was discovered on the shore of a river. Also, with several of his victims, he would remove their skulls and take the skulls several miles away from the drop-off point, which fits perfectly with what happened to Millie. However, he never dismembered any of his victims, at least not that I could find. These next three theories are about who Millie was. The first regards a potential personality or lifestyle, while the other two regard concrete missing people. The first theory as to Millie's life before her murder is that Millie was well known, or at least someone who was going to be missed. This would explain why the murderer went to such lengths to remove any identifying features, such as fingerprints and her head. However, as I stated earlier, Millie didn't look like any of the missing women in the Spokane area, so she must have been from out of town, and nobody has come forward to claim her. The second theory is that Millie is Mary Ann Hoagland. Mary Ann Hoagland was a runaway from Santa Rosa, California, who left her family after facing abuse at their hands. She was placed into a juvenile detention facility, but escaped at age 12 and has never been seen since. She vanished in 1981, 3 years before Millie's body was discovered. It's a dark possibility, but perhaps Mary got involved with terrible people in order to survive alone, and slowly migrated north into Washington. She had 3 years to get pregnant and give birth, and this would have been more likely if she had indeed been taken in by an unsavory crowd. She also had blonde hair, which fits Millie's probable hair color, but was much shorter and lighter, although, being a child at the time of her disappearance, she could have grown after her vanishing. Very little is known about her case, and since she is a missing child, I will be covering her in a later video. Personally, this isn't the theory I believe, but it's an interesting one regardless. The third and most likely theory in my eyes is that Millie is Sheila Annette Pauley. Sheila went missing in 1980 from Ehrenberg, Arizona. She had an infant son at the time, fitting in with the fact that Millie had obviously given birth before. She was followed out of a bar by several members of a motorcycle gang and was never seen again. Some internet sleuths theorized that she was kidnapped by the members of this motorcycle gang, who then moved her around the country. In this way, she could have eventually worked her way up to Washington State, where she then might have met a grisly fate. Further supporting this theory, is the fact that Sheila had a gap in her front teeth, just like Millie's skull. She also had moles on her neck, just like Millie, and was in the correct height and weight range. All of this was discovered by internet sleuths, who then reported their theory to the correct authorities. In 2015, DNA was collected from Sheila's son, now serving time in an Alabama jail, to be tested against Millie's DNA. As of 2017, the DNA has not yet been tested, or at least the results haven't been released, but I personally have a very good feeling about this. There are so many signs that Sheila and Millie are the same person, and this would mean that not only would Millie get put to rest, but Sheila's son would finally get closure. However, the fact still remains that Millie's murderer is on the loose. Identifying Millie is just one piece of the puzzle, although I'm still very excited to see what the DNA testing results are. Millie's case is a tragic and horrifying one of a young woman whose life was brutally stolen. It chills me to know that her killer still hasn't been identified and could be living a free life right now despite their heinous crimes. However, I have the utmost respect for the internet sleuths who managed to find the connections between Sheila and Millie and might actually be responsible for solving this decades-old crime case. Please, if you have any information on Millie, Sheila, or their potential connection, contact the numbers in the description below. To do more research on Millie's case, visit the forums and threads I have also included. Please, help bring these women home.